Your fate, adventurer, resides in the whale's gullet.
In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I come up with dungeon crawls, or rather specifically, how I come up with a dungeon crawl with a short time frame, and yeah, this happens more than you think. This is kind of related to like the Goodberry video that I did where I talked about how I built up lore and stuff about something and changed game mechanics to fit what I wanted to do. So I figured it'd be an interesting video to talk about how I come up with a dungeon crawl on the fly. And first thing I saw was this post by Bob World Builder. And he was talking about like what kind of magical items you could find in the digestive tract of a giant fish style dungeon. So obviously an amazing location for dungeon crawl. So quick note here, the thing that I don't do is I don't then go and read adventures that other people have done. I don't read dungeon crawls, I don't read adventures, I don't read other people's stuff that they have written. I just use other media and stuff like that as a starting point. That first grain of inspiration, what I did is I thought, okay, what have I been seeing lately that would make a good hook for an adventure like this? And weirdly enough, it was Gab Smolder's Dredge video. If you don't know, Dredge is a, I don't think it's out yet. Or maybe it is. If it is, it's brand new. This is great. This is the setup to the first part of the game. There are weird artifacts that are in the ocean that somebody wants to get out of the ocean. The weird objects, the weird relics attract wildlife. So part of the thing is it's both dredging the bottom of the ocean and also fishing because the local wildlife has been attracted to these relics and have eaten them or attached themselves to them. Also, I've been playing a lot of Cult of the Lamb lately. The idea of like a cute cult where there's just some weird, horrible stuff going on in the background. And specifically, I was inspired by like the Lighthouse little aquatic guys. So I felt like, yeah, there should be this big dungeon within a whale creature. And then there should be like cultists in there. Then I started exploring different whale stuff. Beluga whales, killer whales. They have this thing called the melon, which is basically just like a communication organ. It's there so they can direct sound waves outward. And I thought, this is perfect. If there is a cult of creatures living in the whale, then they're going to be inside this melon thing so they can hear the commandments of the whale creature. Also, I went over the whale digestive tract. Obviously, there's like a million different things. Like, oh yeah, if you got swallowed by a whale, you might die, but you wouldn't actually get swallowed because the esophagus is too small. But in the case of the dungeon crawl, the whale is literally so big, so large, that it would actually take in the entire boat. And so you'd be kind of left within the whale trying to figure out a way out because you wouldn't get swallowed by it. But you'd rather kind of be in the weird fore-stomach area of a whale. And what I did is I basically just did an amalgamation of a bunch of different types of whales. Again, very simple plot hook. You've been hired to find these relics that are in the ocean that are being eaten by fish life, and the fish are being mutated and altered by these magical items. All the magical items were apparently being transported by a ship that got capsized, and so they're all on the bottom of the ocean floor. It's relatively shallow ocean, so you can still actually trawl the bottom of the ocean for the wreckage, as well as fish for the creatures that might have taken in the relics. And so for this part, there's various random item tables and various manners of which you can go about doing this. So the two main ones is like you can use your skills to either fish or trawl. And then if you want to do something else, then I always give the players the idea that they were chosen for this task because of their abilities. So anything you can think of your player character So anything you can think to do that might be a better solution is something that is available to you to try. And obviously, if there's a druid, they're gonna like speak to the local animal life and maybe try to get them to help. So there's a bunch of different ways that they can get a bunch of these relics. And that's what the first, like, probably 30 minutes of the game is, them just grabbing all these relics. And then the real dungeon starts, because once they've gathered enough relics, then the giant dire whale will come in like this massive tidal wave and just eat the entire ship. And then the player characters will find themselves within the creature itself. I just found a random map, which looked okay. And I just did a very simple overmap. There's really not that many rooms in this thing. There's basically the stomach area, the blowhole area that leads to the respiratory system, and then also a little set of carved stairs that lead to the whale melon itself, which I couldn't really find a great map for, but I did find it very quickly. And then I actually used the little Cult of the Lamb lighthouse cultists as icons here, which again is to keep them like sort of cute looking, but this is where one of the major mechanics is included. So there's various things that are very difficult to traverse within the whale. If you want to try to get to the blowhole respiratory area and possibly get out, that's going to require some very high ability checks or a creative solution or something like that. So you can try to get out that way, but if you gain abilities that this little, and I describe them as just like various little humanoid aquatic creatures, like a bunch of them were like looked like crabs and stuff. You could talk to these cultists and gain abilities that will allow you to traverse the whale more easily. So you can interact with this little group of cultists that live within the whale melon, where they can't communicate to the whale, but they can hear the whale's emanations, and they discover deep universal truths for it. So this is where the hook of the dungeon crawl is, the mechanic of whale attunement. So here's the thing, I really enjoy throwing out special little mechanics for each dungeon crawl that I do. Usually something very simple, yet it's going to be a game mechanic which is going to directly influence what is happening in the dungeon crawl. So it's something that is usually unique to the current dungeon, such as whale attunement. So the longer creatures are within the whale, the more likely they are to be seen as parasites that the whale wants to get rid of, or possibly symbiotic organisms that the whale wants to collaborate with. So neither one of those are good. If the player characters try to take a long rest within the whale, they'll start to be attacked by the whale's immune system things, which are these little sort of like white blood cell blobby things that attack the players if they try to rest within the whale. And those attacks will, if they for example, if they try to cut their way out of the whale or damage the whale body in any way, those attacks by the whale's immune system will get worse and worse and worse, and they won't have a good time. But if they get whale attunement, then at first that seems like a good thing, because there's various parts in the whale that are easily accessed if they have whale attunement. What whale attunement is just a general vague concept of the whale finding you more acceptable and wanting to have a symbiotic relationship to you. So that's a very good thing if you have, like, the whale attunement goes from 1 to 10. And so if you're on the lower scale, say from like 1 to 5, that's very good, because the player characters can move around more freely, they won't be attacked by the immune system as much, and everything's hunky-dory. However, when it gets higher, then the player characters are going to find it harder to do things that might hurt the whale. They might find it even harder to make decisions that might help them leave the whale as well. Players might be all like, oh yeah, whale attunement, I want to get as much whale attunement as I want to be as friends with this big whale, but then it's going to make it actually harder for them to leave, because they're going to start getting disadvantage on stuff where well, why would I leave the whale? The whale and I are symbiotic. I'm hearing all these deep universal truths from the whale, and things actually are getting harder and harder to do if I want to leave. Now, this is something I would never do during a full campaign. However, for a hook, for a dungeon crawl like this, I think it's easier. I think it's more acceptable to take a small amount of the player's self-determination away, especially if they're in a weird situation like this where there's magical energies that they're messing with. And I think that the vast majority of players will sort of catch on that it's really a balancing act with this mechanic, and they don't want to piss the whale off, but also they don't want to get too enmeshed in the whale's like weird energies and whatnot. Also, there was just a shipwreck caught in the corner of the whale's mouth. This is one of the ships that had some of the relics in it, so there was still some evil creatures and stuff within it. So yeah, various ways to escape the whale. They can either, brute force it in some manner and escape through something like the blowhole. They could try to figure out a way to protect themselves against like the whale's digestive system and get out through there. Or they could crawl through the respiratory system close enough to the whale's brain where they could communicate with the whale and, kind of convince the whale to spit out the boat and everything. And the whale's aware of the artifacts. That's why the whale swallowed the ship in the first place. So the player characters might be getting some sort of money or something they want for those artifacts. So this is kind of like a conflict to the point where it's just like, hey, we want to get out of here, but we also want these artifacts. So if they do a good job with if they do a good diplomacy job with using persuasion and logic with the whale, then that will make it easier for them to escape with all the relics. With something like this, I generally just have it a general idea, and I don't make that many rooms. So basically, the areas that the dungeon crawl takes place is on the boat when they're doing the fishing and trawling, and then they're in the forestomach of the whale. There's the blackened shipwreck area. There's the whale melon area. There's the respiratory track and the stomach track, and then the blowhole track. So, yeah, this is not that much stuff, but this is where my ability to improv stuff really helps me out. You might find it easier if you write out stuff a little bit more less broadly than I do, but I find that because I never know exactly what the players are going to be interested in doing, I don't want to focus too much on any one thing if I have limited time to write a dungeon crawl. So the Whale of a Time dungeon crawl was a heck of a lot of fun to run. There ended up being several little sort of quasi-combat things when the player characters were trying to get relics away from the altered sea life. And then they did do some combat within the whale itself against the whale's immune system and the blackened shipwreck that had a bunch of jewels in it. So overall, it was a pretty fun time. They ended up doing the path where they sort of got enough whale attunement to where they could get into the blowhole and get near the whale's auditory system so they could actually communicate with the whale, and they did an okay job with diplomacy and ended up escaping with some difficult checks. The mechanics with that I figured out is that if they did a very good job, there would be less of an issue with the whale spitting them out. Because they didn't do an amazing job, they had to do some. They had to avoid some obstacles and setbacks as the whale the whale's body kind of went crazy trying to cough up the ship. So they were attacked by several waves of the whale's little immune system blobby things. And they got out of the whale okay, though. None of the NPCs died, and they ended up getting a good amount of relics out as well. So yeah, a very fun thing. I hope you enjoyed this look at how I come up with the creative side of dungeon crawls, where I come up with the general basic story and hooks of the dungeon crawl, and how I come up with some unique mechanics for every dungeon crawl that I run. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I think I'll do one of these where I talk a little bit more about the mechanics side of a dungeon crawl when it comes to maps and stuff like that. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video.